Hi folks, this is Jason Moore here with MTGOacademy.com, and this is the penultimate installment of Dime a Dozen. That's correct. There is only one remaining installment of Dime a Dozen after this one. We are really getting down to the wire here, and I wanted to make sure that before it's all said and done, we get into those matches with big mana one last time, because if you go all the way back to the very first videos I put on MTGO Academy, they were blue-red cloud post videos. At the time I was calling it Archaeology Class because of Archaeomancer, a recently printed card back then, being featured alongside Ghostly Flicker. Today we're doing something similar, though of course we are not able to play Cloud Post. We are playing Tron. You can call it Is It Tron, you can call it Murasa Tron, you can call it whatever the heck you want. I'm actually calling it Fraggle 2 Tron because I net decked this from some of the Pauper League results, and this is a deck that Fraggle 2 has been running. This is mostly his list. I mean, the sideboard's going to be quite a bit different, but the main deck I believe is 100% the same. Now I wanted to use this list, A, because it looked pretty good, and B, because Fraggle 2 actually appeared on a podcast called Pauper's Cage back in the day, probably 2012 or 2013. I want to say 2012, and that's a podcast that I helped co-host all those years back. So a bit of a throwback in a way. Shout out to Fraggle 2, of course. Still seems to be crushing things in the competitive Pauper scene online. So a big salute to him. And let's go ahead and talk about what makes this deck so powerful and why I want to be playing it. Now, the basic gist of Tron is that you want to be playing all three of these Urza pieces. Once you can do that, every mine is going to produce 2 colorless, every power plant is going to produce 2 colorless, and every tower is going to produce 3 colorless. This just leaves a lot of decks in the dust. You're able to have very busted starts by assembling a turn 3 Tron at the best, and you're able to be far more mana efficient and have spell advantage in the mid to late game turns. And what I mean by that is we're able to cast multiple copies of Mole Drifter when our opponent could only possibly cast a single one with the amount of mana they have available. So that is one of the big advantages of Tron. It gives you a degenerate element to your deck. It allows you to outperform other decks in terms of mana efficiency, card advantage, attrition-based elements, what have you. And what makes this variant of Tron and most variants of Tron so much more effective is their level of consistency. So this deck has a lot of ways of searching through its own library to find the same pieces over and over again. We've got 3 copies of Expedition Map to get all of our Tron going, get all of our colors fixed. We have Mystical Teachings as a 2-of to find whatever answer cards we need, because we ultimately are a control deck, or whatever end game components we need. So we've got Ghostly Flicker if we want to start an infinite loop with Mnemonic Wall. We have Pulse of Murasa if we want to start a finite loop with Mnemonic Wall, but also gain some life, get some key creatures back. We have Capsize if we want to try and lock the opponent out of having many permanents on the board. So that's a lot of consistency there. We've also got 4 Prophetic Prisms, which will help with our mana consistency. Same goes for Shimmering Grotto and Chromatic Star. That's also going to help with the mana consistency. And then just a lot of looks into our library. Seagate Oracles, Compulsive Research, Mole Drifter, and if we really need it, Mnemonic Wall to get a component back. So the deck is going to run fairly well at a fairly high level in pretty much any match where it's not being all that much disrupted all that much, rather. And then you just throw together the basic control elements to stay alive long enough to do all of that. So with Fraggle's list, we've got 3 Flame Slashes and 2 Lightning Bolts, as well as 2 Twin Bolts, which is not the most famous card or the most popular card out there, but this can help against Delver decks. It can help against various tokens that you see in Kuldotha Boros. And I think the appeal of this card, other than the fact you can get it with teachings, is that it's somewhere in between just a basic shock that can take out a 2 toughness creature and an Electrickery which could take out multiple 1/1 creatures. So in game 1, when you're not sure whether you'd rather have a spot removal spell or an Electrickery more because your opponent is unknown, Twin Bolt serves as an in-betweener. And it's also direct damage to the opponent, which could eventually lead to a kill here and there. And then, aside from that, I mean, Seagate Oracles definitely get in the way. Pulse of Murasa can pump our life total up a bit. Rolling Thunder can work as a sweeper. And then we have 2 copies of Condescend. Very small amount of permission. And I'm going to be honest, while the Condescend does seem to work decently well in this deck a good percentage of the time, I don't think it's all that great. The appeal of playing Condescend in this deck is that we have so much mana that playing an X spell like Condescend helps us take advantage of that mana. So let's say we Condescend an opponent's spell for 5. That's a reasonable number, right? You tap your tower, you tap your power plant, and you tap your island. Well, okay, that's assuming we have Tron first of all, so that's already us in a good position. We're still tapping 3 mana to play a conditional counterspell that requires the opponent not to have a lot of open mana around. So 3 mana for a counterspell is not a great rate in Pauper to begin with. There's a few instances where you could do this for 2 mana, and it's certainly better in those cases, but there's even more instances where you might have to tap 4 or 5 lands to get your Condescend to work. At that point, you're not playing an efficient permission spell. Anyway, that's the end of my rant on Condescend. I want you guys to keep that in mind. It's been working fine in the deck so far, so I do board it out quite a bit though, so that's another thing. So let's move on to the sideboard. I kept a decent amount of Fraggle's sideboard stuff, but I wanted to be a little more prepared for the 2-man queues and some of the top decks that are performing in the leagues. So he had various fog effects, and he had a lot of artifact hate. I kind of trimmed that down a bit. The Electrickery and Flame Slash, 4th copy of the Flame Slash, are definitely from him. The 2 Dispels are from him. As opposed to playing something like Pyroblast, this one you can also bring in against burn decks in the 2-man queues. I think that's fairly relevant, so I wanted to leave those in, and you can also use it against the blue decks, so seemed reasonable there. The Ancient Grudges were from Fraggle, as well as the 3 Stone Rain. So what I changed out, he had an instant speed Stone Rain that he could tutor with teachings. I didn't have that, and I wanted to just try Earth Rift instead and see if at any point I would have preferred an instant speed version of this. This one does have Flashback, obviously being the big boost. I'm playing Serene Heart because, again, and I could be wrong, but my inclination is that decks like Burn, Hexproof, sort of fast, non-interactive decks are going to be slightly more popular in the 2-man queues, and both of those decks are still decently popular outside of the 2-man queues anyway. So Serene Heart, not such a bad option. And then I have a Relic of Progenitus, not just for graveyard strategies, but also opposing Tron decks. You use the graveyard a lot. You have Mnemonic Walls, Teachings. You're trying to use Pulse of Murasa to get stuff back. A lot of Tron decks play Haunted Fengraf. So there's that. There's various blue-black Archaeomancer and Forbidden Alchemy type decks. And then I have 2 Hydroblasts again for burn as well. And this will also help against Affinity. Since we cut down on some of our artifact hate, we are now sort of compensating for a card that's pretty strong against Affinity because it kills a Tog so efficiently, and is also just the best card you could be playing against Burn, in blue. So that basically sums it up, and I'm kind of losing my voice. I have to apologize in advance. I've been a little bit sick this past week or so. So I hope you guys will bear with me. Hopefully my voice is not too unbearable and too hideous. And once again, guys, we're really almost done here with Dime a Dozen. So I want to extend a very, very heartfelt thank you. Jeez, I'm screwing this up already. I want to extend a very, very heartfelt thank you to all of you guys for tuning in, even if this is the very first time you've ever heard of this series. It's much appreciated. I hope you guys will send out some comments if you can, and just continue to play Pauper and continue to enjoy this format. And as far as the next few minutes are concerned, let's go ahead and get ready to enjoy these matches. Let's battle.